Quick disclaimer, all Destiny 1 raid footage is taken from Achievement Hunter Let's Plays, the Underbelly is taken from Planet Destiny, and the walkthrough of the Leviathan raid is taken from Cactus HD. Sadly, I could not get enough people to film the raids myself this week, so that's it. Everything else is mine, though. Alright, please enjoy. So Destiny 2 is out, and so is the Leviathan raid. Too bad it sucks! Seriously though, this is hands down the weakest raiding experience any Destiny game has ever had. But before I can get into that, let me take you back to 2014, the first raid, Vault of Glass. No one really knew what to expect from the Vault of Glass because, well, it was the first raid. No one really knew what it was going to entail and why we needed to wait a whole week to start playing it. If you ask pretty much any Destiny player what the best raid is, chances are they're going to say the Vault of Glass. The Vault of Glass is held in high regard in the Destiny community for good reason. It was fun, it was fluid, all of the objectives were simple. It's actually kind of funny looking back from these previous raids, how almost primitive the Vault of Glass seems. All the objectives are very simple, with very simple mechanics to boot. Guard these things, kill these lights, use the item to drop the boss's shield to damage him, don't get spotted. Even the final area is simple. Go in and kill things, or stay out and defend things. The mechanics were simple, but we're going to come back to that, because then the next raid also kept things relatively simple, with Crota's End. Stand near the light, stand on these plates to build the bridge, kill things. Where the final boss kicked things up was it introduced this idea of roles. I put it in quotes just because it's kind of more honorary than anything, but these roles play a valuable role in future Destiny raids. This idea that somebody had a task to do. There was the sword bearer, and then there was the shooter. Well, there were 5 shooters, really. King's Fall took this roles idea of people having specific jobs and made the most mechanically complex raid Destiny arguably has had to date. And a lot of people didn't like it because of that. A lot of mechanics were just kind of sprawled and overlapped on each other. And everyone had a sort of role. Taking Golgoroth's case. Oh, I'm going to take the aura. Then the final boss fight against Oryx is heavily reviled, mostly because it's so mechanical that the difficulty curve doesn't come from actually challenging boss fights or waves of enemies. It came from following pretty much just a list. The margin for error was incredibly unforgiving. Oh, someone accidentally slipped on edge off the platform, that's gonna be a wipe. One person died due to a stupid mistake. Oh, that's it, everyone's down, we're gonna wipe. Even on normal, there was only about one time where dying was okay because you could be rezzed. Pretty much every challenge was created with 6 players in mind, and a lot of the times that meant if someone died, the challenge had to restart, and a lot of people didn't like that. The following raid, Wrath of the Machine, was definitely considered to be an improvement far and wide. The objectives were a bit more freeform. All these orbs are going to drop, throw them at the same time to lower the shield. And the Siege Machine, oh my gosh, the Siege Machine. Arguably one of the best raid experiences in Destiny 1, I'm not even kidding. It was a fun raid, but it stumbled on the final encounter because it had so many mechanics thrown in there. But the thing about roles is that while there were a lot of mechanics at play, everyone was pretty much responsible for one of them. The problem with this final boss fight is that everybody was responsible for everything because everything was random. You could be empowered, but if you weren't, you stayed on your side. But if you were, you had to be on some place where there wasn't an empowered person. All even distributed, great. Use the corresponding cannons to kill the servitors. Build the orbs at the shield, and if he teleports to your side, dunk on him. But if he doesn't, look around for the supercharge if you're doing the challenge. Everyone had to learn everything, and things got complicated in this messy, tangled web of communication that everyone needed. And it was clear what raids were expected to be from that. Raids became defined by mechanics. The big thing for me is that raids went from letting you choose where you stand to deciding where you stand. And the Leviathan is no exception, and it is easily the worst raid in Destiny. Every encounter utilizes roles, but every role is just someone standing somewhere so someone can run somewhere. It's incredibly dull. There's always someone standing on a plate. But even more than that, these tasks are extremely long and repetitive. There's an encounter in the Leviathan where it's very similar to an encounter in King's Fall. In King's Fall, you had to constantly rotate people to open a door. And in the Leviathan, you have to constantly rotate people to raise chains to shoot crystals. The thing about it in King's Fall is that opening the door was the only objective. So there was this constant flow, and there wasn't these breaks in flows to go stop every now and then, to go back to the middle, to shoot some floating sandwiches or something. Every challenge in the Leviathan has these breaks, so you're not just doing things once, you're doing things 3 times to finish. Destiny raid bosses have always had this trope of you have to do something, then you do a damage phase, and then you go back to doing the something, damage phase, and rinse and repeat. And that logic has sprawled across the entire Leviathan raid. There are a lot of objectives in the Leviathan that directly compare to other raid experiences, but these just feel so much more tedious and long as a result of the breaks. The Gorgon's maze was a great time in the Vault of Glass, because the only thing you had to do was not get spotted. In the Leviathan, not only do you have to not get spotted, you have to not get spotted 3 times. Everything feels drawn out too long. Even opening a door to an actual encounter takes forever, because you need to do it 3 times. And very rarely is it, 3 times, 3 tries. No, it's not, because in a lot of these challenges, you die if you mess up. The final boss is particularly ornery in this aspect. There's a part of the fight in which half the team is split up. The half of the team that's separated must then relay information to the team that still remains in the throne room. This has to be done 4 to 6 times. I honestly lost count. It just happens. And then, of course, I hate damage phases. And the Leviathan raid makes it even worse because you have to stand specifically here. If you wanted to, you could go wherever you wanted in Vault of Glass, but if you want to damage the boss in the Leviathan, you have to stand specifically here. These mechanics have all been used in raids prior, but here they're more incredibly dull than they've ever been. Where's all the effort gone? Seems like all the effort's been placed in making this underbelly with a bunch of different chests with different ways to reach each of them. But the problem with the underbelly is that it's just incredibly dull and intricate to navigate, and it's just not fun. You could get all the way to the boss room if you wanted to, but you can't go to the boss, so why would you? You need to do all the challenges anyway. And all the tunnels look like pretty much direct rips of every other Cabal tunnel that we've seen in Destiny. It's not fun, it's not distinct, and the rewards aren't even worth it for picking up the chests because legendary engrams they have a different place in the economy now. They're now more commonplace, and they are just not worth searching for. Another gross mechanical change that's been made to just the idea of raids in general is that they've removed the 30-second cooldown penalty to be revived, which I actually like because it keeps the pace up, but where I feel like it stumbles is it has a revive token system now. If someone goes down, you can pick them up, but you only have 1 coin per pickup. So that's an extra mechanic and level of coordination on top of everything else. Realistically, couldn't this have been a hard mode mechanic? I know that in hard mode it's typically if you die you start over, but that alone is annoying. Insta-wipe mechanics just aren't that fun, Bungie. But also just, technically, the amount of glitches in this raid compared to the other raids, horrendous. There are so many more glitches in this one raid than there were in all of Destiny 1 raids. The reason we couldn't beat Callus the last time was because one of our fire team members was not getting any ammo to drop. Seriously, no ammo drops. And then another time when 3 people who are separated from the other 3 need to relay symbols, one of them just didn't show up for us and it tanked the run. It was frustrating in the past to know that it was the stupid raid logic that was killing us. But now this wasn't even part of the mechanics, it's just the raid being screwy. Maybe Bungie, you should put a few more hours into playtesting and tweaking the main encounters of the raid, not worrying about farting around this big open space that no one wants to be in. I feel like this is a really bad way to start Destiny 2's endgame experience. Destiny 2 was a very similar game to Destiny 1. That was fine by me. I figured most of the effort was going to be put into where a lot of people would be spending their time, the endgame. But it wasn't. It's clear that Bungie's definition of raid has just become a bunch of mechanics. And it's kind of funny. People really want matchmaking so that they can play the raids. Bungie says, well, no, they're too complicated, and then it proceeds to continually raise the barrier for entry. You can summarize each encounter in the Vault of Glass in about a sentence or 2, but you have to go on for multiple paragraphs with the Leviathan and such mechanically complex raids. Boy, what a time to introduce guided games, am I right? I can't even imagine doing this with strangers, much less inexperienced players. It's just, why, Bungie, why would you make a raid like this when you're trying to pull more casuals into the game? Some people might say I'm making a mountain out of a molehill when it comes to this optional mission in a video game, and I will concede that point, but to me this is setting a pretty bad example for the industry. Like it or not, Destiny 1 had a pretty big impact on the gaming industry when it released, and we now see a lot of games trying to mimic it in various ways to various degrees of success. But the problem I feel like Bungie is perpetuating here is the idea that these endgame activities are good because they have several mechanics, not that they have fun mechanics. or they introduce any new concepts to the game. They don't turn what we've done in Destiny on its head or go through it in another way. It's just a bunch of stuff that you need to do to complete a mission, and it can get incredibly boring and tedious, and it's teaching other games that this is the way to go. Just overlap mechanics. People will think you're complex, and it'll work. Yeah, you know what? Yeah, it's probably better to do that than introduce any interesting new paradigms to the shooter genre or change the experience in any way that's meaningful to the player. Yeah, don't do that. But a broader issue as a whole, Destiny sort of spawned its own subgenre, but the thing is it hasn't really earned its crown in that area yet. It just pretty much showed up first. There's never been a great Destiny experience within that subgenre. Bungie's laughing it up now while it's raking in money, but the reality is all it's going to take is someone to figure out what makes the experience great, and then boom, Bungie's lost its monopoly that it so greatly treasured. The problem that Bungie just seems to refuse to confront about raids is that they are, in essence, a completely different experience to just Destiny in general. It goes from this very easy sort of run around, shoot things, knockabout, to having to learn so many things in its current state. And it just leads to this toxicity where people get mad because they have to teach people. You'll go on LFG sites, and I'm sure guided games will be affected by this too, where people will specify, please don't be a new player. It's just such a high barrier to entry, and Bungie is continually making it higher. The Vault of Glass may not have been some sort of complex enigma to solve. It was a logical extension of Destiny gameplay. Shoot these, defend these, but with a more of a through line of context, which made it a lot more fun. What I really would like Bungie to do for coming raids is ask, what's at the crux of the experience of raiding? What made raids like the Vault of Glass make Destiny 1's horrible grind worth it in a lot of people's eyes? The reality is that if they don't, Destiny 2's longevity is going to pale in comparison to Destiny 1's. I used to run raids every Tuesday with my fire team on the refresh, and it was great, but I don't think a single person is excited for hard mode when it comes out on Tuesday for the Leviathan. I mentioned in my Destiny 2 review that I felt like the game stripped out a lot of fat, but didn't add a lot of muscle. Considering how strong the endgame is for the Destiny experience, it really feels like Bungie half-assed this area that definitely should not have been half-assed. We should have had both cheeks here. Hey there, if you sat all the way through this video, thanks for watching. Sorry if you were expecting a music review, because this is a music review week, but this was a video I felt like I needed to get out or I just would not work on it. So here it is. Everyone seems really happy with the Leviathan, and I don't see why, so this is just my opinion. If you like the Leviathan, then woohoo for you. Next week, things should go back to schedule with reviews, games, and music. So subscribe if you want all that loveliness poured into your timeline, and I will talk to you guys at some point in the future.